Ah, you're still there, and rightly so. So the first part of Deponia is finished, and as your proud owners of the Complete Journey Box Edition, nobody would blame you for gaming right on. Accordingly, the commentary will also roll on, but there's not much to comment on in this room. The tutorial hasn't changed that much since part 1, you know. There are, of course, some new lines, but we recycled most of them. Find out and write me a mail. Yes, Rufus has become a better person, at least that's what Doc says, and that's a good opportunity for me to explain the structure of this vast and very complex introduction you've just seen. Well, it's not that long, but it's still packed with a lot of stuff, as you've just seen. It's a brilliant intro with brilliant actors, and of course, that wasn't the original Rufus under the mask, but, and you would never have guessed that, it's our truly Steffen Boos. He's our current studio manager, at least that's what his business card says, and Daedalic's former human resource guy. He's one of the finest in our crew and has the most hilarious ideas. He also wrote a master thesis about full motion video adventures, or frankly, the use of videos in adventure games. And that makes him a kindred spirit, as he wrote about many things that were riding my back as well for a long time. For example, that there must be a way, even nowadays, with our newest generation of games to reintegrate these videos into adventure gaming. They were already fully established, but right now they have some kind of C or D movie status and are rarely done professionally due to limited budgets mostly, but there must be some way to literally get them back into the game. Anyway, we did some pioneer work here and brought back some full motion video into our adventure. It's not interactive, yet it's back in our cool intro here. All hail, by the way, to my chief scripter of the Deponia trilogy, Simon Nguyen, who wrote the storyboard for this lunatic trip to a narratively and visually different world. He even did the cutting and spent time tinkering on a Deponia prop, which he happily blasted into pieces in the backyard of the Daedalic company afterwards. By the way, if you haven't got a picture of Simon in your head or otherwise, I would recommend YouTube, where you will find our developers video for one of the Deponia parts. Can't remember right now which one that was. Anyway, you can see us there on a junkyard, and I bet you will recognize most of the team. You will see artists, various scripters like Alex the Little Russian, who's also credited as the Russian, and finally you get some FaceTime in this video. And Ede Wolf, the Wolfman, or our project manager Tom Karsten. They're described as Tomcat. All of them helped me and Carsten to crash and trash that car. And of course, Simon, also sporting an alias as the Mexican, since there was no other fake beard at hand for him when we shot the video. Just take a look. Finally, this is where the action begins. Rufus ain't got this hammer for nothing, and he definitely doesn't need it to fix Bozo's trawler. It is, of course, an essential part of his crazy Rube Goldberg machine, and that's his plan to get to Elysium. This is a good segue to my next question for Rufus himself. As a matter of fact, the set, especially this one, is a very loud place. This means all voice recording we did directly during the shot couldn't be used in the final version. It all had to be redubbed in the studio. This was the case for many scenes, but you have to re-record all that without any context, without the set to speak of. And that, of course, again means you only have the set in your head. You got the text you're supposed to say, but is it possible at all to recall what you did there or what you were supposed to be doing?
Huh. Well, it's the same old song. I mean, what a hypocrite asking that question. He knows perfectly well I did a fantastic job. His eyes almost fell out. It was written all over his face. How on earth does Rufus do this? How does he pull that off? Okay, now I can tell you. This set was just my kind of place. It looked just like my first bedroom, in my first bachelor apartment. And that came to my mind because I was very upset back then. I was offended. I mean, today I understand. When I had visitor for the first time. You know what I'm talking about? And what did she say? She said, "Your bedroom looks like a scrap heap." I mean, what a shitty thing to say. Then again, there was some truth in those words.
And of course, it didn't violate fire protection requirements. That's why there are no more questions on this one. Moving on.
No, absolutely not. Of course, I did violate noise prevention regulations, but you've already pointed that out.
Yes, while the introduction to the first part was really complex and you had to assess solutions, content, and characters all by yourself, the second part starts out much more fast paced. I'll boost tension once more in the third installment, but the ultimate climax in terms of drama versus depth happens here, where the player's hands are bound. Cletus has you at gunpoint, Rufus' back is to the wall, and he's left with no other choice but to press the button. However, I want at least some interaction here, and I'm glad I followed through with that idea. It's just so gloriously silly, but also equally rewarding to show the medium computer game in all of its storytelling beauty. And that happens by showing the tag that actually tells us what happens if we press a button. Unfortunately, there's some dust on it when Rufus tries to make sense of the icon. Looks like an ejection seat, but at the closer glance, well, there's some more dust on it. It gets blown off the icon and now looks vastly different. So, for all players who almost did miss that, take a closer look at that icon. What Rufus' mind does to him there is pure gold. It's also quite nice how I manipulate the player's expectations there. They come crashing down after promising build up, and all that with only two objects. Yeah, I hope it still works now that I've spoiled it. Probably not, so I just ruined the punchline. Whatever. Now, this room seems familiar, doesn't it? We know it from the first part. It's the bridge of Bozo's trawler. We just docked at the floating black market, so what else is there I didn't already tell you about this room? Maybe. Yes, there's something. I scripted the intro cutscene myself here. That was great fun. One of the last steps we take is actually staging our scenes. Speaking in terms of order, the whole game is first scripted with dummies and placeholders. At that point, we haven't created all the visuals. Then we add the backgrounds, and after that, we animate the characters corresponding to the backgrounds. So basically, we let them do all their special actions they have to perform with in certain scenes. That's a crapload of work if you have to do it all by frame instead of just telling the character to do this or that, like you can simply do it in 3D games. Yeah, it's probably not that simple, but in 2D, very few things are recyclable if they are tailored towards certain backgrounds. And thus, we end up with a huge pile of special animations we can't use again. There are multi-purpose animations, though, things we can use again, that are directly linked to the characters, facial expressions, or things like the morning stretch routine. That one is, for example, from an idle animation. We can reuse that if the character is supposed to yawn and stretch, or when taking a look around in the sense of, oh, where have the others gone? We also have a solid pool of close-up animations by now. That's a good thing about a game you had to split in three parts. We pile up a lot of those standard animations and can actually animate without losing precious time or money we don't have to begin with. The related technique is something I grew really fond of. We have this close-up scene, for example, where Rufus reads that letter. This scene is a patchwork from other Rufus close-ups. I still take it on visually, cut them and fiddle in different facial expressions that were never meant for Rufus, yet still serve as backup animation pool. I enjoy this sort of tinkering. The true reward, however, came with Goodbye Deponia, since Rufus acquired a great pool of roughly 20 different emotions: pissed, bored, daring, vicious, evil, happy, silly, all kinds of stuff, really. The more animations we had, the more fun was this final touch: the pimping, the polishing, and staging. I love minigames, but this isn't a minigame. Actually, it's just a map. What I'm trying to say is, I like maps. So, that kind of local maps helping you to travel to certain areas of the game. On the backside, you can't just explore or walk to that area yourself. The good thing about the floating black market is that you actually walk to each of its areas without using the map. But if you want that shortcut, however, you're free to use it, as walking from area to area takes quite long. So we decided to spread these maps all over town, since we wanted to provide some waypoints for players who would get lost otherwise. To prevent him from that, we created that local map and the first couple of waypoints to get right into the action. Explorers would get their share later on if they'd want to see all the connections between locations. It's in fact one of the last assets done for Chaos on Deponia, and I can't help but to say I like maps, and this overview of the floating black market is something I scribbled pretty early. The more proud I am that it found its way into the game eventually. Would be a terrible waste if that didn't happen after all. Oh, the things you have to do to design a game. In this case, it's installing pipes. The pipe labyrinth over there will play an important role in the game's course. We had to redesign it a few times, but more on that later on. There's, you might have guessed it, yet another small corresponding minigame, and I like minigames. Above anything else, we installed pipes all over the level. Originally, it was supposed to be one of the most vicious puzzles, at least among those in Chapter 4. That's because it's a puzzle complex where you have to not only combine items, but also had to relate them to each other. Among other things, the differently colored pipes were part of that, and we had to lay them all through the level. Jeez, this puzzle was literally all over the place until we figured out a satisfying mechanic. That was another great collaboration with Bade, our head of game design, who kept bugging me, "That's too complicated, Pokey! People just won't get it." But eventually we polished it and got differently colored pipes as a result. Down there it's actually brassy and not so different to the pipes you see there after all. Maybe I should have talked about this in another screen. What else can I tell you about the screen? Probably that there's a pretty old scribble done by Micha from the time before he found the actually Deponia style. It was among the first buildings he sketched for the floating black market, and that was in fact Doc's houseboat. You can't really tell from this angle that it's a houseboat. From the other direction, it's probably more obvious. But the form was pretty similar in Micha's sketch. Nah, not really. Yeah, well, turns out I got nothing on this after all. Doc's workshop. Probably a good opportunity to try to explain how I think video games as narrative media can do things other non-interactive media like film or books can't achieve quite as well. Especially this scene where we have Clever Bite blocking the entrance to Doc's workshop is a good example of congruity between the external conflict of a guard dog and the inner conflicts that Rufus has to face. It shows his inability to acknowledge the superiority of this highly intelligent and technological, sophisticated robot dog, um, which leads to him going through far more trouble than he'd actually have to.
Okay, look, I'm like an actress, right? I play every scene as you'd expect me to, and nobody would ever know what goes on inside me. Nobody will ever figure that out. My cousin didn't, my geography teacher didn't, my parole officer didn't, neither did those three shrinks and my various exes. Nobody ever managed. Nobody, because I've got a serious poker face. And what I did there in that scene, those inner conflicts, this congruity pressure. That's all just an act, but it's so well acted, in fact, that everybody thinks they figured out what, But nope, just give up, people. You will never know. Especially not you, Pokey.
All right. But there's another thing about Clever Byte. It's actually a little amicable nod towards a friend of mine, a programmer, highly talented computer nerd from a circle of friends where it was etiquette to have as many pseudonyms as possible, programmer street names, so to speak. By the time now, they relax a little bit about that, I reckon. But I stumbled across that habit they had developed at some point in their use, and I thought it's pretty funny that his name in the scene was Clever Bite. It was so funny, actually, that I just adapted it into the game right away. And for a robot dog, it was especially fitting, Clever Bite.
Yeah, yeah, I got it.
And now we're on the way to Doc's lab, or if you click this later, we are leaving Doc's lab, or maybe you're on your way back in, don't know. This is more of a gangway screen, a little space in between with a very parallel construction. This doesn't seem to carry any significance right now, but later on the screen will lead to my, and I don't say that lightly, I say it often, but never lightly, favorite screen in Chaos on Deponia. There will be, naturally, great chaos. Rufus will be confronted with a very special person. I can't tell you right now, but the scene is gonna be brilliant. Oh, what's that smell? Must be self praise. Let's get out of here, but enjoy that scene later on anyway.
Ugh, unconscious again. Great.
Patience! This is only the beginning of the game, and
Protagonist.
come on. Rufus is already there, and he can assist Doc to bring you back into action.
What protagonist sleeps all the time?
Were there plenty? Sleeping Beauty, or Meg Ryan in Sleepless in Seattle.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, she did sleep. She slept. Although, all right, the title has Sleepless in it, but well, that's about Tom Hanks. At least I fell asleep while watching. Somebody's sleeping, and so are you. It's only a temporary condition. Moving on. We didn't leave that many widescreen rooms in Deponia, as most scenes transport what we want to say just fine in standard format. But for a change, we have a screen that scrolls when Rufus moves to the left or right far enough. Another great moment for our superb parallax scrolling, even if it's not much and only in the foreground to create some depth. Pity, really. But then again, it's probably better game-wise if you can reach all the objects in the screen with one click. But I guess it's only adequate for this beautiful location to apply the reinvented wonder of widescreens, saying, "Nope, this is where we scroll and enjoy the nice panorama." And accordingly, we will bear the cross of clicking 2 times to reach the gadget shop store. We can take it, so take it. Enjoy the silence, enjoy the moment. Pokey. Well, look at that ugly bastard in his gondola. If that isn't Poke, it's just a gondolier. But he's voiced by me. Yep, that's the character I get to play. Very Hitchcock-esque, how I wrote myself into the game there. Yeah, I'm quite the attention whore. In fact, the concept of Deponia was the first one of our games where I said, I think I really would like to sing in the game. After all, it's a game about complete egomaniac. So it's totally fair game if I, as an equally complete egomaniac, get to sing in it. And I'm not only performing here, but also as the hobo, as he's called in the English magazines. I don't even know if we ever gave him a name in the English translation. Yeah, I guess they made that up on their own, calling him a hobo, I mean. The narrator, the bard, telling the story from the sidelines. But here I got my second gig, looking suspiciously similar to the bard, the hobo. This time as a gondolier, the Italian variant, so to speak. And accordingly, I talk with a politically incorrect fake accent. I also had to sing those 4 songs. Well, actually, it's the same song, but only with different lyrics each time. And I had to sing them with this ridiculous Italian fake accent. Was great fun, though. If you run your own video game company someday, you can do that as well. Until then, that's exclusive to me. Ah, yes, another idyllic bar scene. We have this secret agenda in the company prompting us to hide a bar in each of our games. Congrats, you found the bar in this one. Nah, it's actually a part of the game, and it's Gulliver Scully. I guess the name isn't dropped often enough in the game, despite the fact it's a reasonably cool name for a basement bar. There's a good chance you visited this place quite early in the game while searching for a data cartridge of some kind from the gadget shop. Can't be certain though. In case you just came in here to help Doc fixing goal, please stop listening right now. There are spoilers ahead. Stop listening? Very good. To the rest of you, hello, you actually did it. You've more or less successfully helped Doc performing his surgery. Granted, he was a bit nitpicky about what cartridges to use, and he almost certainly didn't do everything right himself, but in exchange, you get to see a truly extraordinary phenomenon, and that's Goal's personality split. So, Goal, please tell our eager comment clickers in terms of acting, is it quite an effort to play 3 different aspects of one personality? And Alex lent you her voice for this, so how did voicing those 3 characters work out for her?
Alex and Spunky Gull got along excellently. Baby Gull, no problem at all. Lady Gull was a challenge, as apparently that character was a little unfamiliar to her. After all, not everyone's a lady like you, Pokey.
Alright, spoilers are over, as is this chapter of the commentary. I hope you enjoy the remote. What a shame I don't have one of those right now in the studio. For a quick switch, you know. We'll switch back to the game instead. That's easier anyway. My head of game design, Bade, always is between rock and a hard place in terms of discussions with me, that is. Otherwise, we get along perfectly fine. But he suffers from the fact that he is the most competent game design expert who has to check the game design of all our games. Of course, he's also an employee in a company I have some stakes in. So basically, I'm his superior. And that puts him in a tough position when he needs to convince me of something, since in a worst case scenario, could just tell him, nope, ain't gonna happen. Most of the time he's right though. Anyway, and this room kept us busy for a long time, especially Bade. He used to look at it and said something like, oh man, no change of levels, Pokey, don't put so many exits in there, Pokey. I mean, are there so many level changes at all, anyway? I mean, there's this particularly ugly one. And how many exits have we got? 1, 2, counting these other 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and 7. 7, if you count the one leading to the arena later on. Good God, we have so many exits! Ah, yes, we're in Uptown now, the only place on Deponia where you have to rake the yard. It's probably the last place where you can do that anyway, since it's the only place with trees. And this important task is, of course, one for Hoedown. Up there to the right, the gardener, a character who's very dear to me since he always remembers me of my childhood. A time when I listened to a very special song. I hope I can recall it correctly. It goes like this. Hey there, kids, it's getting late. Time for bed. But do not close your eyes yet, but instead take a guess who's hiding among the shades. Outside your window where he sits and waits for his chance to enter as soon as you sleep. It's hold down, ugly as can be. Hold down, ugly as can be. As soon as you close your eyes, he'll come around. Perk up your ears, listen to every sound. Then you'll hear his breath as he's impatiently waiting. Maybe a faint scraping on the window's grating that comes from his rake. You will soon get to see it's hold down, ugly as can be. Hold down, ugly as can be. All together now. Hold down, ugly as can be. Hold down, ugly as can be. Oh yes! Captain Seagull's estate at the top of the floating black market is not only a beautiful setting to behold, but also a big surprise for the players and Rufus. Only few are aware that we did pull off a little sleight of hand during production by not telling Rufus his father would join the Deponia cast as well. We shoved the seagull right into the scene, and for Rufus it was just as surprising as it was for the player, which resulted in a very authentic performance. That little trick worked out brilliantly, and the family reunion became just as stirring as I've imagined it.
Yeah, well, first of all, I was shaken, not stirred. I mean, I was down and out. I was totally wrecked, and this sucked so much. But later, on my way home, all I was thinking was, come on, walk it off. We've been there, we've done that, just move on. Cary Grant also regularly complained how he didn't understand what North by Northwest was about, and why Alfred Hitchcock gave him his text afterward. He read the script afterward. It was the same problem with Casablanca and The Big Sleep with Humphrey Bogart. And so I'm in the same boat there with the greatest of the great. And it's like, no, it's okay. We'll just let that rest. But the worst thing is, and the users can't know that, we did that scene with an advertising agency, and when I entered the set, I felt ashamed. I sincerely hoped that none of these ad people were lurking around, since, I think ads seriously suck. I'm not a sellout. Unfortunately, just for that moment, one of their ad hunters came along. So the whole thing's really unpleasant memories, really.
Good old Crane! He is among my favorite characters. In my oldest concept, he was supposed to be the brother of Seagull. At that point, though, Seagull's narrative purpose wasn't fully determined or developed. Actually, I'd rather not tell you now. That's gonna be a surprise. Anyway, I always liked the idea that beneath the state of someone outrageously rich, there was someone living who's really poor, and consequently, both of them live in exemplary neighborly animosity. I'm especially fond of the background Micha illustrated here. Crane lives in such poor conditions that he actually had to draw all the things he lacks in his flat on the wall with crayons. It's so pathetic that I don't even need to comment on this any further. And that's also why this condition isn't mentioned any further within the dialogue either. Despite Crane's poverty, this is an equipment room. Spiteful as we are, we can take everything he has left. It's not that much to begin with, the thread, some bread, and of course his grandma's ashes. God, this is vicious. That again is a good transition to the fact that we had some serious trouble to keep proper track of all the items you can pick up in this chapter. We created a crapload of spreadsheets with items, and those were way more than fit in our inventory. So we had to come up with something, as we didn't want a scrolling inventory just because someone might pick up an extra item. We wanted in fact a perfect 25 item inventory. We ran the numbers multiple times and came to the conclusion that 25 was a perfect number. Eventually, though, we miscalculated and realized you can't have two of those items simultaneously, since you have to spend one to get your hand on the other and so forth. Tough stuff to put all those items in context of the others. Ultimately, there was something we had missed, or some item had to be added. I can't really remember. Alex told us, but the inventory was already done, as was the first part, and the inventory in Chaos on Deponia was supposed to look just as the one from the first installment, but we realized, shoot, we have one item too much. I mean, granted, it was very, very unlikely that there were players who would run all over the floating black market doing nothing but picking up items, so they would end up with 26 items. You would really need to be hell-bent on that. Yet, it is possible, and accordingly, we had to kick our brains into overdrive to solve this. But as much as we tried, we couldn't just take away one item, and so we decided, I think that was a cool, enjoyable choice, to turn this glitch into an Easter egg and also an achievement. If you manage to cram 26 items into your inventory, you will get a nice achievement. This screen carries fond memories of my whole team. When I see the screen, I see all of them, since everyone contributed in some way, even more so as it was the team from ancient times. Of course, I see Micha, who did the background, I see the animators, the scripters, and also some folks who really stand out, since they did things that actually weren't even their job on this project. I see Dome there, for example, who sadly left the company some time ago, but back then he worked in the marketing department, and he's also the cousin of Marco Hüllen, who did The Whispered World. He was with us and did the marketing gig for several years, and he came up with the most ludicrous ideas, many of too far out even for our games, if we didn't want any trouble with the law, that is. But he was the one who said, Pokey, you need to get that platypus trapper in there. And so I got that platypus trapper in there. He said, get me that platypus trapper, when he heard we did something with platypuses, and I was happy to oblige. Another person of interest tightly connected to Deponia is the spiritual leader of our animators, Gunnar Bergman. He's part-time lead animator of Deponia and Harvey's New Eyes, and I say part-time because Simone, in her position of art directress designate, took on that job herself from time to time. But each time when time got in her way, or when she wanted to draw, Gunnar took the wheel. He didn't draw much himself later on, but instead was busy showing the ropes to the trainees or freelancers. A lot of metaphorical juggling was involved to show these people how exactly wanted our animations to be, so the scripters could implement them properly. But in this location, Gunnar also provided a character for the German version with his voice once again, and I must admit he's become one of my favorite voice actors. From our German staff, that is. We gave it a try back then, way back then. I think the first time was for a picture puzzle game, probably one of those Shakespeare games we did or something. Ever since we cast him for one or the other character. In the German version of Harvey's New Eyes, for example, he actually voiced several characters, and he did it extraordinarily well. Being part of our English-speaking audience, you won't remember his voice from the police officer, for example, you met during the tutorial, but he did a really nice, exaggerated John Cleese voice. And right here, Gunnar is a fast food clerk in the German version, and thus one of my favorite roles. Great delivery. Oh, Lord of Darkness. In German it's, oh, Herr der Finsternis. Manchmal machst du mir richtig Angst, Herr der Finsternis. Sometimes you really scare me, Lord of Darkness. Excellent. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I like minigames. This minigame has a long history. It was even part of the production process before we actually started working on Deponia 1, if I'm not mistaken. back then, and I hope I won't do somebody wrong here. It was Ulf who worked on the first draft. Yes, Ulf is a German name. He's a colleague who was on the team, but unfortunately only for a very short time. Unfortunately indeed, since he was one of us, one of the Daedalic with heart and soul. The minigame story, though, begins even before that. I had, as many wannabe writers tend to, a folder on my hard drive that contained a dozen or more or less brilliant ideas for movie screenplays, or at least rough drafts of screenplays written right from my brain on paper, or rather into a Word document. Some of those screenplays were really promising, and while most of them didn't get far, some of them almost made it to the finish line. The idea, however, that somebody comes into a fast food restaurant and by shrewdly manipulating and combining special offers walks away with a meal yet not paying 1 cent originates from a screenplay I wrote, and that screenplay was called The Night of False Idols. That was also about clones, by the way. Some sort of road movie, though featuring two morticians who drive around with the clones of Elvis and Jesus in their trunk. I don't think I'll ever finish the script, but basically it was a cool idea. Is there a more beautiful screen than the close-up of the platypus field guide? I don't think so. I really like close-up screens, even if they are not part of a minigame. These pages really contribute to the experience of the world, giving it some more depth, and of course useful facts about platypuses and their offspring. That's probably the best thing about this. All demands are satisfied. One thing here deserves special attention, and that is font. Micha developed it when we said that Deponia needs to work independent of any translations. Or frankly, we didn't want to have any text in there that needed extra translation. After all, Deponia is not on Earth, so why should they use our letters? They don't have a Latin font. They need one of their own, and that's when one of our sly artists had an idea. Wait. I'll probably give credit to the wrong person as my memory fails me yet again. Anyway, whoever she was, she went through great efforts to gather letters from different screens to create a font, deducing which letters should have which meaning in our font. She created a complete coherent font out of this. You could even read if you focused enough. There was one backside though, as I recently read on movie tropes. Yes, our games actually have an entry there. There is content lost in translation. There are actually letters you can read in the German, but not in the English version. Yeah, well, and so we ended up just with the situation we wanted to avoid. Despite its hazardous environment, Deponia is home to many creatures, great and small. And here we have a gopher, and we are trying to trap it. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I like minigames. This is yet another one, and it's almost an analogy to part 1, as we have again the chess knight move mechanic. This time, though, the gopher is a knight and not us. It's a pretty simple minigame. You probably won't have any problem solving it, so I would rather tell you some more facts about Deponia's wildlife. So, what have we got on this? There are, of course, platypuses, very popular. There are also gophers, and people keep mentioning wombats. They're basically the rats of Deponia. We've never shown one of those, did we? No, I don't think we actually ever showed any wombats, even though they are so adorable critters. If I ever give you another Deponia trilogy, there will be wombats. I promise. I don't know if I mentioned that, but I like minigames. It's pretty embarrassing and may lead to serious injury. For example, when you get beat up right in the schoolyard by a family member sharing your obsession. And that's what the next song is about. Yes, I'm gonna sing a song. It goes like this. Your mama needs a walkthrough and relies on stranger safes. Your mama spoils and comments to your favorite Let's Plays. Your mama fangirls PewDiePie on her own YouTube channel. Your mama covers Huzzah and that's anti-friends sampled here, but all of that is minor stuff. No reason for complaints, for it's far more than that. Your mama likes mini games. Your mama likes mini games. Your mama stuck in Edna's cell, she tried again today. Your mama bids for open beta tickets on eBay. Your mama skips the cutscenes, your mama skips the texts. Your mama posts your selfies with I love Daedalic hashtags. Your mama preps pics of her bozo cosplay for upload. Your mama searches blackouts for a hidden leopard mode. Yeah, but be that as it may, the only reason you're ashamed is your mama likes mini games. 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 Mini games. This is the district with a nice name, Little Venice. As far as I remember, I named the districts of the floating black market already in my very first concept, hoping I get to implement them in the final game, as well as for a chance to drop their names, of course, at some point. To me, at least, this has always been Little Venice, and if there's one thing you can't leave out when you have Little Venice, it's the mafia. Also, there are Italian gondoliers, houseboats, and even the architecture looks a little bit like Venice, a dream born from trash. Deponia. As the creative lead of a game, you sometimes need to blindly trust your team. Honestly, I always thought looking at the screen and knowing what absurd things are going to happen here animation-wise, it'll work out just fine. And that's despite the fact that I had no idea how the screen was gonna look like. I had no vision for the animations in this room, and neither did I know how they would be implemented here. I just went out thinking, oh, they'll get this right, and that's how it went down eventually. Guess we were lucky. Woohoo! We walked quite the extra mile here. At first, we didn't even know if we could possibly pull this grade A beat 'em up off with a Visionaire engine, as it's designed to create point-and-click adventures, of course.
You call this a grade A beat 'em up?
Why not? It's an grade A beat 'em up, an action-packed grade A beat 'em up, for that matter.
Are you kidding? I don't see any gore or fatality moves. What the hell were you thinking?
Well, you gotta admit, I mean, we're talking about adventure players here, right? You know, clicking under pressure, well-coordinated actions. The skip button's there for a reason. Those are adventure players after all. For them, this is hardcore action.
They must be pretty lame.
Spunky Cole, those are our customers you're talking about. This is the gadget shop and one of my favorite elements in the game. There's a shop in every Deponia. Shops are great places for adventure players since it's here where you can gear up. Now, we don't have any money, but at least Rufus can try the gadgets as much as he likes. But the utter madness of combining these absurd gadgets to get your hands on another one is not the only fun you will get out of this. Stuff like the cool squeezer hat or the anti-gravity socks. Jeez, the AG socks were so much work. In my hand, it seemed pretty simple. Thinking of a reverse gravity animation, I mean, I just thought we would turn Rufus upside down when he walks along the ceiling. Crap. Now I spoiled that. Whatever. Instead, we had to draw a whole new walk cycle where his coat would also behave like Rufus was upside down. A bit over the top, but great job anyway. I guess what they say about karma is true. The extra animations we needed for the socks were balanced out when Rufus walked around while using the golden dragon of invisibility. Another remarkable thing are the Cowboy Dodo all-purpose cartridges in the shop. It's a small teaser for our star appearance in the third part. Cowboy Dodo will be a not-so-minor character in the third installment, and here in this shop, also one of my favorite dialogue situations takes place. And that is the shop-o-mat, talking to Rufus about the whereabouts of the gadgeteer, the shop's owner. Where can he be? And nice thing is, it doesn't matter at all. Plus, the visuals really make the scene shine even more. Great stuff. This screen is a very good example for how you can cleverly exploit gaps in your concept during production and even get a few nice funny situations out of it. In fact, I failed to write a proper puzzle for applying to the unorganized crime syndicate when we started, and Micha was forced to sketch the room nonetheless. What was supposed to happen here until that point was all half-baked nonsense, and on top of it there were certain necessities, like for example hiding plans. But what item or hotspot was that supposed to be was totally unclear to me. Plans, what plans, and so on. The first draft of this room was utter bullshit, but miraculously beautiful things started happening when we tried to fill it with life, like for example the idea of shaving the kitty or the job interview minigame, and I especially like how that plays well with the logic behind it and all. Despite the widespread hate for minigames, I personally like minigames, just in case I didn't mention that. John, did I mention I hate minigames? I mean, that I like minigames? I like minigames. Did I mention that I like minigames? I like minigames. Tell me, John, did I ever mention just how much I like minigames? I like minigames. Do you like minigames? I like minigames. Did I mention that? I like minigames. This screen is another location that's obligatory to any game that takes itself seriously. The dark alley and the back door leading to the dark alley. It's fundamentally wrong to write a game concept and leaving out the dark alley and the corresponding door. I sang about that in another developer's commentary. Yes, I sang. And I can only emphasize that it's common courtesy among game designers to have a dark alley and hide items in a trash can there. Well, we have a trash can here, or rather a trash container, or should we just call it a container since everything's trashy on Deponia. Anyway, we didn't hide any items in there, but instead you can hide in there yourself whenever you want to. Come on, try hiding in the container. You'll be rewarded with some cool animations. What it's actually good for, you will find out later in the furthermost of all out-of-the-box puzzles that I've ever put on the screen. It's so sinister, mean, and brutally out of the box that it almost seems like some sort of dramaturgical god complex to make Rufus get into the box. Just let that sink in for a moment. And here we are. Finally, in the Resistance's headquarters, Baby Goal is already here, and we also meet the infamous leader of the Resistance. I'm pretty sure Janosch looks just like you imagined him all along. Another thing with Janosch was getting his remarkable speech defect through translation coherently. That was really a challenge, especially spoilers ahead, as it is involved in a puzzle later on where his manner of speaking is a key to the puzzle's logic. This also had to be transported to players, switching the sound off as well, of course. Apparently, there are people who like to switch it off. So the speech defect had to work properly in text form. Due to this, we had that speech disorder in text form during voice acting, of course. Adam, who gave Janosch his voice in the English version, had to work hard to understand what some of those sentences meant to begin with, especially in regards of Janosch's battle plan, which is rather confusing and thus rightfully criticized by Rufus. You have to give Rufus some credit here. He would make a way better rebel leader than Janosch could ever hope to be. Now, enjoy the minigame.
I think it makes perfect sense.
Um, yes, baby goal, but you just got out of a taxing brain surgery, a rather moderately successful brain surgery, I might add.
I got out of what?
More on that later. For now, enjoy the scene and this colorful dream of a rebel hideout. After we had a very convenient map navigation while roaming the floating black market, in this rather huge chapter, don't worry, it's not as huge as a black market, we have another map, and a very logical one too. And we really need such a map, as we can travel to different places like Portafisco, where the upper ascension station is probably located, though we can't go there just yet. Then there's Isla Watchet, a storm-ridden island, and the North Pole, which is maybe also called North Pole. It sounds okay, but it would be in fact a terrible mistake. See, it's rather the north by northeast pole, since we know that due to the planet's heavy pollution and the corresponding global warming, the geomagnetic field has been altered. So we actually do not have a real North Pole, just a north by northeast pole, and even that's pretty pathetic. And only because it's tilted to the right so much does not mean we are way up in the north. Anyway, it's the north by northeast pole. Quite impressive, isn't it? We already know the floating black market. That little illustration to the lower left is supposed to be the lower ascension station, by the way. It's a bit rudimentary, but you've probably guessed it anyway. The whole thing is based on a Deponia world map I came up with pretty early. I have no idea where I pulled it from, but I always thought Deponia had to look just like that. Well, of course, with a better resolution than 8-bit. And this is only a small area around the Rust Red Sea. Welcome to the shore of Portafisco, a picturesque trashscape in mud and filth, complete with funny colored clouds that already give you an idea of the odor you're about to smell. That is not about to smell because you are safe in front of your monitor. Just for once, you should be happy that today's maddening speed of progress hasn't reached the sensual world of the nose yet. That's something left for upcoming generations to experience. Imagine the angst before opening your HoloMail Cloud app on your portable Invisimobile called iVis, not knowing if mentioned message may or may not contain yet another prank fart attachment. Ah, yes, the distant future. I'm looking forward to that, just as you can look forward to the very near one, for there are nearly as neat discoveries to be made in this crazy location. Have fun. This is one of those "what the hell were you thinking" pokey screens. There are a lot of that. Frankly, in terms of content, you could have staged the puzzle relevant objects we have here in another screen, but I wanted to give this room some screen time though, since it was something we planned to show in Deponia 3. Even though we've revised and rewrote Deponia 3 excessively, especially the Portafisco passage, this room still managed to stick around. In the third installment, it will be presented from completely different perspective, context, time of the day, and so on. Well, actually, this room's a relic from my own take on Deponia 3, and thus has no real significance for this game. And actually, the room really backfired at me in Deponia 3. The new concept made it pretty difficult to write the room's content into the new story. I had to bend and work around things, a truly frustrating situation, since showing this room previously resulted in very limited design choices for it in the third part. Fortunately, it all ended well. I like the scenes taking place in this location in Goodbye Deponia. That space and distance don't quite match the Portafisco we'll see in part 3. Let's call it an optical illusion, so don't look too closely. And this is a tent of the seer, the fortune teller, the guru. He closed his business of telling the future for a while and uses his abilities now for couples counseling. And this council is something we'll definitely see in the later course of the game, or maybe you already did that by now. Not that Rufus would need anything like that, but you've got to admit that this is a difficult situation he stumbled into, or rather was shoved into without
Hey, there was no fault on my account.
right, thanks, Rufus. Fortunately, he's got his remote control to switch Goal's character. A question for you, Rufus. How did you experience that? Isn't that incredibly handy? Don't you sometimes wish you had a gadget like that in real life? A remote that can switch the personality of someone else?
You know what's so lame about you, Pokey? You're lacking attitude. You know, of course, such a thing would come in handy, but I don't have one, and I get by just fine. You know, there are parts of the body, let's just put it this way, that if you touch those at the right moment, with the right intensity, you'll get the same results. And that's way more exciting than pushing a button, if you get my meaning. But no, I get you. Yeah, you prefer the easy way, and that's why I'm the hero of the game, and you're the guy just doing the grunt work. You know, that's that.
Of course, I'm aware of that, and Body parts, sure. We're talking about the shoulder, right? And yet again, your knocking skills are put to the test. This minigame was, once again, not as easy to stage as you might think. There's not much more to say about this room. It's more of a passage, a room between rooms, only showing how everything's connected and so on. I like rooms like these. This room also zooms in a little closer on our protagonist, and that's a nice feature, actually. Oh, you can hear the rustling of my beard. There's this movie, what's it called? Fanboys or something? With a bunch of Star Wars fans who want to infiltrate Skywalker Ranch before Episode 1 is released to snatch the film's rough cut. Of course, they get caught, and then George Lucas calls and instructs his security guys how to deal with the intruders. And then one of the fanboys, or it's a fangirl, I guess, gets really excited, going like, "Oh, I can hear his beard rustling." Yeah, and there's truth in these words. You can, in fact, hear beards rustle. By the way, the film ends with the most beautiful statement: "What if the movie sucks?" When they finally sit in the cinema watching Phantom Menace. Very enjoyable and in no context to this room whatsoever. Moving on. Back on track. After these highly dramatic events, Rufus managed to unite 2 of 3 parts of Cole's personality and is on his way with Doc and Bozo to recover the last one. And of course, we hit the road with Bozo's trawler, a boat we all grew fond of. It's almost a character in its own right. The trawler's bridge, however, is Deponia's version of TARDIS or the Millennium Falcon or the bridge of the Titanic. And on that, I got a question for Rufus. Did this set become your home away from home after a while?
Yeah, I wish it was, but every time I wanted to sit down on the couch, you already occupied that place. It's right where that pillow is now. Your ass made quite a dent there. Yeah, and it's still in perfect condition. You know, I always hoped somebody would kidnap you, and then the police would have made an ass mold and searched for you. But frankly, with you sitting there all the time, how on earth could I feel at home?
Yeah, you gotta admit though, this was always my spot. I always put my mug on that cover over there. The spot was just perfectly aligned with the screen. You can see right now in the image. It wasn't too far away from the window and not too far from the door. It's just my spot.
Yeah, and your arm was always in reach of the candy that was under the stairs there. And it wasn't your candy anyway. You know, I don't want to say whose those were, but they weren't yours.
Yeah, but I might add into whose nose they got shoved later on.
Yeah, but tell him whose nose you pulled them from. You know, when you succumbed to your greed and you ate them.
Well, someone had to put them there. Let's ask Bozo later on. Well, and here we are on Isla Watch It, or rather its shores. Nothing too important going on here, apart from some minor pollution. Maybe Rufus can boost that a bit later on. It's often implied that I had an environmental agenda for Deponia, but frankly, that's not the case. Of course, I'm pro-eco. We all are, basically, in favor of a healthy planet. I don't think there's anyone going like, "Come on, let's go and pollute some environment." So I don't think this is a conflict I have to put further emphasis on. That would be just not very original. For A New Beginning, which was intended an eco-focused game, or rather its original story and design by me until Kevin Menz took over, I had indeed an environmental agenda. That was the proper battlefield for such a conflict. The challenge to tell such a story is exactly what I mentioned above. How do you create conflict from something we all agree on? And that's what A New Beginning is about. Why, if we are in agreement there, is everybody still so passive about protecting our environment? Here on Deponia, though, we are free from any eco message and rather focus on what a mischievous little bastard Rufus is. As if there's need to emphasize this. Anyway, well, since that's not necessary, I'll tell you people, yes, that's a good one. Isla Watch It's backstory. I wrote that for the Steam cards. There's a lot of bonus material on Isla Watch It, exclusive content crafted for Steam users. And you, who bought the retail box version, you miss out on very, very important background knowledge. Sucks for you, I can't do anything about that. Very enjoyable screen. It's the North by Northeast Pole again, and I really like that frozen caveman. It's one of the rare moments where our background artist Micha also could tap into character design, since the character was part of the background. Isn't it cute how Rufus doesn't even acknowledge the poor frozen bastard there? I really love that. And another thing coming to mind here is a stars constellation. That was supposed to be part of a puzzle that turned out too complex eventually. It was a bit like the pattern puzzle from part 1. We would have to create a new interface for that and weren't even sure how to pull that off. Ultimately, we decided against it and made the whole thing obsolete by designing just an animation instead. Veteran adventure players probably look at it and try to figure out what vicious puzzle lurks behind that constellation. They've pulled out pen and paper by now to sketch it, not knowing that the solution will be blatantly blotted out to them. It's a rather hilarious twist, so I wasn't too sad that we've dumped the original idea. Well, this place seems familiar. Yeah, despite the mood shift though, he is one of my favorite puzzles, and that is beating that fisherman using mind games. Who has most patience? It's great in its simplicity, since the solution is pretty obvious, with a few obstacles put in your way. It's also a bit lateral, bit out of the box. The light mood is something I created out of the original screen by Micha. I fiddled around with some Photoshop sliders and worked on those lights with a standard soft brush to make the bright spots even brighter. This was only for illustration purposes, but it was so well liked that we kept most of it. Micha didn't change too much of what I set up there. Sometimes that's how things roll. Maybe I'm a latent artist after all. And here we are, back at a secret rebel hideout, the second one in this game. It's here where we encounter a fire-breathing dragon who looks rather familiar. Nah, it's not really a dragon, it's just Tony. I wrote her in pretty late into Chaos on Deponia, cause admittedly I really missed her. She's a solid driving force for Rufus, a very good mirror in which his vicious visage nicely reflects and shows what happens to those who spend too much time with him. And to bask in this, please be careful here. This is the only situation in the game where you can actually die. With a nod to the old Sierra adventures, no less. But Rufus really deserved that. He's such a douchebag. Another place we've already been. Not much has changed, despite the fact that we now have access to the lot machine. Maybe this is a small nod towards my first adventure, Zack McCracken. My first adventure I've ever played. So the homage probably comes directly from my subconscious. Otherwise, knowing the lottery numbers and exploiting that knowledge is a proud adventure tradition. By the way, it's kinda adorable how the gadgeteer closed the curtains so he can sleep in peace. Really warms my heart. I'm not entirely sure, but I might have mentioned that I like minigames. In this case, we control 3 torpedo dolphins trying to chase down a submarine. Seems simple enough, but it's a pretty tough gig, actually. I'm very proud of our scripters pushing this minigame, as they did with many other minigames in the series, far beyond the limits of the usual adventure mechanics. I mean, the Bataka was already a league of its own, but this one, phew, we also had to give the submarine an own AI, so it wouldn't be too easy to catch, and surprisingly enough, we succeeded. The first time I hunted it down, I was so glad it wasn't as easy as it seemed at first glance. That's exactly how a minigame should feel. The best thing about a daring adventure is when the party has gathered and is ready to face the odds together, especially when you gang up with Rufus. Granted, pulling together isn't that easy in this setup. I mean, everyone's pulling together, but in different directions. Well, only means the fun lasts even longer. Our little boarding party has to overcome some minor obstacles I won't talk about right now. One thing, a new character will be introduced. Yes, there's a certain point where the gloves are off, and I was more bold writing Rufus. That was when I realized the others couldn't really do anything against him, so I could go all out on narrative. Above all, I enjoyed especially establishing things and effects of things that happened during the travels, in the time that's passed between us playing Rufus. Things like Rufus slowly but surely losing his mind, reflecting the fact that in this puzzle complex he built himself a stunt double, and he's actually talking to him. The name's Ray Coulson, so Rufus is talking to Ray Coulson. You can squeeze quite a lot of reactions out of that dummy by using it with objects or other items. The content here is really solid, and I don't think it is heard by a lot of people, cause the moment you build the double, the rest of the puzzles are fairly easy. But now that you know about it, just try it. I put much effort into making Rufus delightfully creepy here. Talking to himself, well, that happens from time to time, but talking to a dummy, to a stunt double Ray Coulson, even to the point of arguing, writing that was admittedly a highlight for me. Really enjoyable. I do like minigames. Don't worry, there's no minigame in this screen, but we plan to have one here. And yet again, one that's not supposed to be classically solved, but another minigame you're supposed to break. Didn't work out though. It was too wonky considering the screen size. And while I've been to London for recording, the people at the studio, I think it was Simon, decided, let's scratch that. And I didn't even notice. Was too wonky anyway, probably wasn't even that funny. Damn it, Simon. We already have had a small lecture on Deponia's wildlife at some point in this commentary, but here we go again with a couple more animals. There are, of course, quite a lot of insects on Deponia. Background animations are crowded with them, and here we have a Deponian frog on screen for the first time. What's up with that frog? Find out yourself. Maybe I'll give away some more of that story in the next screen. Apart from that, ain't got much on this. Maybe the fact that this whole subchapter wasn't part of the original concept. Oh, I keep saying that, don't I? What else? What else? What else? This screen was among the last ever created. And, this is too exciting anyway. You probably just want to game on instead of listening to my ranting. Especially if there's not much to rant about. And I go on and on and on. Pokey, what are you doing all that while you're on the edge of your seats? What happens next? Oh my god, can Rufus save the day? Will he and Gold get together at last? And I keep babbling without explaining anything relevant whatsoever. To add insult to injury, you have to listen to it. How horrible. I should have long stopped talking at this point. That would have been infinitely better. Why am I doing this? I'll poison developers' commentaries for you forever if I go on like that. Really atrocious. Well, you may continue playing now. Go on. Play. Have fun. Stop listening to me. Go on. And yet you keep clicking these things. I tip my hat, well done. But as promised, I'll tell you something related to Deponia's wildlife. You probably figured out by now that this weird pod is a decommissioned organ matter transporter thingy. And now Rufus, against all of Doc's advice, uses it to get inside the Organon Tower. Of course, this results in the Fly-esque gene splice, corresponding with a combination puzzle. Another puzzle that took some time to get it out of its concept phase. We just kept telling ourselves, yeah, it's gonna be funny, we come up with something good eventually, and in the end, things worked just fine, and we didn't even have to lift a finger. We only had a skeleton idea, wrote that down, watched what happened, we do this or that, and surprisingly enough, we solved it just fine. There was a puzzle. Awesome. Speaking of awesome, it's really great how Rufus just shrugs off all the risks connected to a decommissioned teleporter. He just doesn't think as far as that. His total disregard for doubt, fear, or his own health, saying, "Oh well, a gene splice. I just walk it off. Can't be that hard to reverse." Enjoy trying. So, I've got, and the screen reminds me of that for some reason, a personal assistant since this year's beginning, who also has some important tasks like washing my feet, rearranging furniture, though mostly I decide to like them just the way they stood in the first place. But that doesn't mean this job is in any way obsolete or something. John, however, he has a lot of dramaturgically essential jobs, like in his job description, of course. Making some dramaturgical coffee, printing dramaturgical copies, holding the dramaturgical clipboard while following me dramaturgically around. And he keeps on pestering me since his first day with one question. Frankly, it's the only thing he said at all. And that question is direct to goal. Let's say, goal. If you had known that Cletus had good intentions in that scene, would all of your personality aspects combined, including Spunky and Baby Goal, have gone with him?
In that case, I would have definitely followed Cletus.
Whoop! There you have it, John.
I won't follow anybody.
Oh, now we're talking catfight. Wait. Of course, they're just two different personality aspects arguing. That's complicated and kind of difficult. Won't make for a good catfight. But maybe we see something like that on the screen any minute, anyhow. So stay tuned. We are heading towards the showdown. Oh, yes, this one was exciting.
Yeah, that was exciting.
Yeah, the set was, of course, pretty hard to find. We needed something that at least remotely looked like an Organon blast tower. We couldn't do the shot at the original place since the Organons were out there for some field exercise or something. I tell you, the application papers alone were a cluster frack of weird files, and we'd have to read all of them, fill in applications and all that. Finally, we decided otherwise and thought, screw this, we'll do the shot somewhere else, and so we ended up here. What's this place supposed to be again?
That's the airport at Saarbrücken, which has been leveled and rebuilt shortly after our shoot. However, I read yesterday, coincidentally, that it hasn't in fact been leveled, but just it was thoroughly disassembled. Lengau is getting a new airport, and they'll probably just use Saarbrücken's old one. I don't think they can recapture its inherent beauty, though. I just can't imagine that.
If we knew that in advance, we could have avoided a lot of trouble. After all, halfway through, we had to, you can see that here, but in the rear wall, it's made of separate armor plates, loosely bolted to steel framing. And there was a gap between the beams, big enough to get the planet killer, that huge Organon bomb through it, which wasn't at the original set, of course.
No, we had to get it all the way here from some backwater town.
Exactly. Transporting that thing was a feat of its own, but assembling the airport wall and bolt it back together again, 2 times above all else, as we had to get it in there and out again. If we only had known, we could have just left that wall constantly open. The truly ridiculous thing is, we had to get the bomb out of a building we needed to demolish again anyway. So, what's that?
Yeah, well, we talked about that. It's like a tenancy agreement. You've got to repaper the walls, even if you know the next tenant won't like the wallpaper with the blue bunnies. Anyway, I never got that, but that's how the red tape rolls.
Red tape madness. But tell me, why would anyone dislike wallpapers with blue bunnies? Those were Harvey papers. Who in the world would tear something like that from the walls?
I know. I mean, anybody who moves in, but it's they're idiots. Never mind.
Yes, Isla Watchet. Caught in unending bad weather. This screen sticks to my mind for several good reasons. One thing is, I remember I did an absurdly far-fetched derivation for, I made those Steam trading card text thingies the other day. Those of you who got Deponia on Steam probably know I almost wrote myself past insanity when working out the cards. You can unlock screens with these cards. This is one of them, and I had give them titles. I wrote an utter ludicrous story for this one. I don't know, maybe it got directly copy pasted on how the island was discovered by some historic figure. It's about sailor who in fact discovered the Isla Watchet and how the island got its name and all. Uh, Another thing is that Rufus needs to fix the radio tower, but he can't get there because that thing is constantly hit by lightning. I also get the sudden urge to sincerely apologize to Goal for some reason.
That ship has sailed, don't you think?
Well, I know now.
Yeah, me too.
See, I wrote this whole thing, and maybe here and there I included some puzzles where Rufus didn't treat you exactly fair.
Very charming indeed.
Yeah, but no hard feelings, right? What? Wait, no, not the chair! No! Hey, oh!